In at number 5 we have Old Friend. This story was told on Reddit about someone's interaction with the demon as a child. When he was around 4 years old, he moved into his new room in the home. They decorated the room, including a large mirror that covered floor to ceiling. Not long after moving into the room, he started talking to the mirror. He would talk to it for hours, playing in front of it, and it seemed that he saw it as a friend. His parents began to worry about this and wanted to know more. They asked about the mirror and he explained that it is where his friend lives. He was able to tell them what he looked like, his hobbies, and how he had died. This made the parents very concerned. They didn't want to scare him, so they went and did their own research about the house. It turns out it had a lot of paranormal activity linked to its past, people tormented by spirits or befriended and then used. They feared this friend could be a demon looking for its next victim. When they looked into the name of the friend, it turned out he was an old owner of the home who had died in that very room. They didn't believe in the paranormal before this, but they were terrified for their child. They moved out of the house a month later and he never mentioned his friend visiting again. Coming in at number 4 we have the Mirror Person. This story happened when a young girl, about 12 years old, had to get up during the night to use the bathroom. Her house was completely pitch black. She could not see anything. She made her way across the hall to reach the little bathroom at the end. When she finally got to the bathroom, she hit the light and glanced up for maybe a few seconds. She saw a face staring at her from the mirror. It was not her reflection, it was a demonic face. She said it was as if someone was stood at the other side of the glass, pressed up against it and staring at her. She screamed and ran. She was hysterical and didn't know what to do. Her dad woke up and found her. She explained what she saw and he went to investigate the bathroom. He then did a prayer session with her to calm her nerves down and protect her from whatever she had seen. The face was seared into her brain and she could not get it out. She eventually fell back to sleep. Fast forwarding to her 30s, and she had practically forgotten that night since she was so young at the time that it happened. One night she was visiting her dad for the weekend. They were sat quietly when he brings it up to her. He said, "Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror?" The memory came rushing back to her. She felt a chill run down her spine. "Yes, I remember," she replied. "Well," he said, "I sometimes think about that night." He looked down at the floor with a serious expression. "I saw it too." He explained to her exactly what he had seen, and it was the same demon that she had seen. Neither of them could understand what had happened. She is glad that her dad kept it to himself all of those years and respects his bravery. She would have never slept in that house again had she had known the demon was real and not just something from her mind. Coming in at number 3 we have the cell phone. The interesting thing about this story is that the demon left proof of contact. Usually they go undetected or make it so no one will believe you anyway. It started when a young boy's mum bought a new home. She hadn't spent time to set the phone up yet. After a long day at work, she got home and put the phone on the counter. Her son asked if he could play on the phone. She saw no harm in this and just told him not to make any calls or send any messages. At around 11:20 she began to get tired and wanted to tuck her son into bed before she went off to sleep. When she got to his room, he wasn't there. He never sleeps anywhere but his bed, so this was surprising. Starting to feel panicked, she looked around the rest of the home. She finally found him asleep on her bed, still clutching the phone in his hand. She picked the phone up to inspect what he had been doing on the phone. At first she didn't notice much, just a few minor changes. The background had changed and there were a couple of new apps. She was looking through the pictures as he had been playing around with the camera. She began deleting the pictures until she got to the most recent one. It was a picture of her son, but it was taken from above. The angle was taken as if the phone was floating above the bed. If this wasn't disturbing enough, there was also an elderly woman's face in the corner of the image. There were no explanation for how any of this happened. Who was the woman? As she shared her story, others reached out to explain this is a sign that a demon is in her home. Coming in at number 2 we have the goodbye. One Reddit user told the unsettling story from a family member saying goodbye. It all started when their grandmother passed away. The Reddit user was Jewish, and so the family always participated in Shiva when a loved one passes away. This is a 7-day mourning period. You build a shrine for your loved one and sit by it for 7 days to allow them to say goodbye. Friends can come and visit during this period, with the direct family members staying by the shrine and holding a service each day. They would have an hour of silence each night at 7 p.m. to allow their passed on loved one to say goodbye to them. The first 6 days passed and nothing out of the ordinary happened. They mourned and had their hour of silence. On the final day, something strange happened. Something felt different during the silence on the 7th day. The room felt cold. As part of the shrine was the grandmother's most cherished vase. It was valuable to her, which is why it was present for the shrine. After the room felt cold, a couple of the family members looked at each other in confusion. The next minute, the vase flew off the table and smashed to pieces on the floor. Everyone was stunned. The vase had been sat there as long as they had remembered without any risk of it smashing. It felt like something was in the room with them. It was as if it had knocked over the vase to make its presence known. It didn't feel like it was the grandma though, she would never have broken that vase. The next moment the doors to the home all slammed shut at the same time. At that moment the feeling of being watched disappeared along with the cold spot. The family shrugged it off as a coincidence and nothing more, but could it have been that the grandmother saved them from the dark entity who felt welcomed into their home? After the doors slammed, the house felt at peace, as if the grandmother had helped them and then simply said goodbye and passed on. And finally, in at number 1 we have ancient Athens. This story dates back to the Roman Empire in 113 AD. The story was well documented, so it's still told today. There was one large and roomy home in Athens that no one would live in. It had a bad history of hauntings and paranormal activity. It was seen as a dark, evil place that no one could understand, so they all avoided it at all costs. Others who lived around the home would often tell of the loud noises of iron clashing in the dead of night. Sounds like the rattling of chains. Some had even noted that they had caught glimpses of an old man with a long beard and disheveled hair through the house's windows. For a long time the house sat empty as no one was brave enough to investigate. Back then little was known about the paranormal. People avoided discussing the house, but those that did believed the home held a demonic spirit. No one wanted to risk getting cursed by the demon. The owner of the home often tried to rent the home out for a cheap price. When the philosopher Athenodorus heard about the story, he decided to rent the home. He wanted to investigate and confront the demon if he had the chance. He arrived for his first night in the home, skeptical if the stories would be true as it seemed to be far-fetched. On his first night the entity appeared. It was an old man as described, with chains attached to him shackling him to the floor. He was screaming, although he didn't hear the scream as he would from the living room. It sounded distant, like it was only in his head. The entity disappeared after a short period of time. Athenodorus marked the spot where he had appeared. In the morning he ordered that spot be dug up. After digging for a short while they came across some old remains. They had been in there a long time. Although they had decayed, you could clearly see the chains where they had been attached to the ground. These were the remains of the entity, a tortured soul that became demonic through their demise and being forgotten about under their home. The remains were given a proper burial. After this the spirit was never seen again in the home. It was believed to have finally been able to pass on. Coming in at number 5 we have Shadow Dog. One Reddit user told the story of a contact she had with a demon when she was younger. Her parents had just divorced when she was a teenager. She decided that she would live with her mother in her new home. As soon as she moved in, she started to experience some paranormal activity. It started small. She'd be reading her books on her bed when she suddenly felt an icy chill take over her. Then she would feel like she was being watched by an entity that hated her, but obviously there was no one else in the room. She said when she felt this she would leave her house and go for a walk for more than an hour. Usually by this time the feeling had passed. She then started to see shadows behind her, like there was someone stood in the room with her. This started to get worse when she would see the shadows move around her bedroom walls. They were getting bolder in their contact with her. The demon then started to imitate their family dog. She thinks this might have been a way to trick her into making a physical connection with the demon, allowing it to take full possession. The demon would make a growling noise from under her bed, like her dog was in need of help. The dog had refused to enter the room for months at this point, so she was not fooled by the demon. After this she could not stay there anymore, with the demon becoming bolder and increasingly active. She moved in with her father and she never experienced anything paranormal again. I do appreciate that she was like, screw you mum, I'm leaving, you stay with the dog in this haunted house. Her mother's probably gone now, R.I.P. Demon got her. In at number 4 we have texting the devil. Demons could choose any form of communication with the living. They are not bound by our laws of reality. Sometimes they choose possession, others will only talk through a medium or Ouija board, but still one priest claims he is being contacted by a demon via text messages. Father Marian Rachel, a priest from Poland, claims that a demon from a failed exorcism is now harassing him. He attempted to perform the exorcism on a teenage girl but unfortunately was unsuccessful. He believed the devil is using this teenage girl to mock his failed attempt via these text messages. One of the messages that he received from the demon was, I quote, "She will not come out of this hell. She's mine. Anyone who prays for her will perish." The priest responded to this that the young girl is clearly still possessed and needs further help. The Catholic Church took this extremely seriously. Although there were some doubters, the majority of the community was extremely concerned about this young girl and her behavior since the possession began. The family of the girl cooperated fully with the church to try and save their sick daughter. They brought her back in for a second exorcism. This one seems to have been successful as far as they're aware. The priest did comment that he received a threatening message after the girl was saved from the demon. They threatened that the two would meet again and he would not be be able to save himself next time. The priest, however, remains confident he has rid the world of this demon. He was calm and confident about the whole thing. I don't think I would enjoy texting with the devil. To be honest, I think it's probably the girl playing a little Halloween trick. Coming in at number 3, we have dark letter. Back when letter writing was still a thing that was commonly done, it was used by demons to leave messages with the living. Over 300 years ago in Sicily, at the convent at Parma di Montechiero, a nun named Sister Maria Crocifissa claimed that she had been possessed by the devil. The story of what happened to her has finally been told, and her letter has finally been translated. The story is told that one morning in 1676, Sister Maria woke up and found herself covered in ink. She had no memory of it, but had spent the night writing letters. Others in the convent had heard disturbances from her room during the night. Some had heard screaming. One said they heard a thud as if she was fainting and hit the floor. Maria had lived at the convent since she was 15 years old. She was devoted to them and had never showed signs of possession or doubt before this incident. The letters explained that Maria was writing on behalf of the devil. He was dictating the words she wrote. The letter said it was Lucifer's plan to possess Maria and turn her against God so she could serve evil. A lot of the letters were coded in hidden messages of symbols and shapes, and they had no way to translate it at the time. Today, some of the letters are still intact, and the Ludum Science Center in Italy attempted to finally decode a portion of the text. The software is reportedly used by intelligence agencies for code breaking. They gave the machine the understanding of Greek, Arabic, the runic alphabet, and Latin. This revealed that the text really was devilish. It described God as a dead weight. It went on to say God could not free mortals from their fate. There is also a reference made within the writing to the river Styx, which in Greek mythology is said to separate the realm of the living from the underworld. The church was trying to disprove that the nun was ever possessed. If anything, decoding the letter proved the opposite. Maria seems to have been very lucky that the possession didn't go further. In at number 2, we have Singapore doll. We all know that demons have an attachment to creepy dolls. There are so many stories of dolls coming to life and terrorizing families. For one unlucky neighborhood in Singapore, an old doll appeared and started to terrorize those who took it home. One Twitter user told the story to her followers as a warning. The doll first appeared leaning against a tree on a busy residential street. The doll was small and looked like an antique. Her arms were bound to her body with string, and she had a cloth across her eyes with Arabic text written across it. The girl brought the doll home and unbound her while also removing her blindfold. She said not long after bringing the doll home, she noticed that it would move around the home when left alone. She also said that she would hear it talking to itself when she left the room. It was clear to her that the doll was possessed. It soon made sense why it was bound when she found it. Although she did not know the doll's backstory, it seems the previous owner has a similar experience. She threw the doll away hoping to stop the demon from being in her home. However, when she returned, the doll was back home. It knew how to return to her home and was refusing to leave. She decided to try and bind the doll as she found it. She drove far away from her home and left the doll. Seems that the doll had been continuing this cycle. When you find and untie the doll, the demon and curse transfers to you. The owner saw someone post about finding the doll after she had left it. She saw that it had been untied and posted, "We bind it for a reason, stupid people, unbind it. It looks unhappy. Good luck to whoever did it." Her account has since been deleted, so she couldn't be tracked down for questions or for them to attempt to return the doll. The doll's current location is unknown, but its existence is now well known in the area. There have been discussions and crimes happening in the locations where the doll has been seen. Crimes that have never happened in these areas. The doll seems to communicate with other demons while alone and then whispers to its new owner when given the chance. Some suggested the doll be burned or crushed, but it is unclear if this would work. Surely someone has already tried this at some point. And finally, in at number 1, we have imaginary friend. Sometimes children have imaginary friends and we don't think anything of it, but what if their friend isn't so imaginary? One little girl from Texas named Madison had many imaginary friends when she was younger. All of her imaginary friends came as a pair. When she was 3 years old, she started to talk about a new friend. Her mother, Kelly, found this strange, as this friend came around by themselves. Her new friend was called Kellum. She described him as a man around the age of 40. She said she saw him as a father figure. She started to spend a lot of her time playing with him rather than her other imaginary friends. She would build her blocks into a tower and knock them over as it made him laugh. The mother was keeping an eye on her with this latest friend, but was not concerned, until she started to sing an old song. At the time, she didn't know how old the song was. Madison would sing the song all of the time. Her mother asked the nanny where the song is from, thinking she taught her it. She wanted to sing it with her to develop her language skills, but the nanny had never heard the song before. She had no idea where it was from. They looked into it everywhere until they finally found it online and realized it was an old song. It was released in 1892. No one in their life would be familiar with this song. She asked Madison who taught her the song. She said Kellum taught her. He sings it to his child. This shocked Kelly. This imaginary friend has an imaginary baby and he is teaching her real songs. She could not find an explanation for it. Things quickly began to get worse. Maybe Kellum had been watching Kelly figuring out he is more than an imaginary friend, but maybe he was an entity communicating with her daughter. One night Madison woke up screaming. When she was older, she told the story that Kellum was grabbing onto her arm, pulling on her. He was getting angry and frustrated that she did not want to stay up and play. She kicked him away and tried to flee the room. She was screaming as she tried to climb the baby gate. Kelly was woken up by the screaming and ran and grabbed Madison as she cried for help. Kelly looked back to the room where the curtains were blowing like there was a great wind in the room, but the windows were all closed. They fled their home. Safely relocated at their friend's home, Kelly called her stepfather, who was a pastor. He did not believe in demons, and if she had come to him sooner, the community might have labeled her a sinner for inviting this entity into her home, but she was desperate. Her stepfather told her to stay away from the home till he was done. He called her the next morning saying it was safe to return. When she got home, holy oil had been used all over the house to protect them. They both said it felt peaceful when they re-entered their home. Madison never saw any of her imaginary friends again. Now she is older and able to reflect on it. She feels the demon was talking to her, telling her stories and attempting to get her to behave badly.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Black Shuck. This unbelievable creature is no fairy dog, that's for sure, although those aren't anything to laugh about either. This is the true terror dog, the brutal, big, bad boy. The canine carnivore fueled by carnage. A hate-eyed and vengeful black dog full of rage and malice. There are all sorts of variants based on where you are, from the Gargas to the Gytrash to the Padfoot, but the one best known could be the Black Shuck. Take one look, and you're out of luck. Some say that this thing is the embodiment of Satan. Wherever it goes, destruction follows. A harbinger of doom with blazing red eyes. If you see one, you're supposed to hide or make sure not to look at it. If you neglect to avert your gaze, your luck will get so bad that you will die within the year. There's one tale of a Suffolk church that tells of a Black Shuck visit back in 1577. The enormous dog came running in, killed the man and boy, and caused the steeple to collapse through the roof. Then it left in a hurry, leaving dark scorch marks on the door. And that was just one little tale. Even if you are a dog person, you don't want to run into one of these. Something tells me a treat won't smooth things over. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Tsuchigumo. Monsters have been mashed for as long as we can remember, and it's not always a graveyard smash, mind you. Sometimes it's the combination of many real, living creatures to make something extra nightmarish. This is a beast with the body of a tiger, the limbs of a spider, and the face of a demon. Part real mammal, part real, albeit much smaller arachnid, and part mythical monster. Apparently Tsuchigumo were known for eating travelers as they made their way across the countryside. In the remote fields, no one can hear you scream. 1 or 2 traveling morsels wouldn't be enough for them either. In one tale, a powerful warrior took one down and sliced it open, to loot the body. This ancient hero was playing Dungeons and Dragons way before anyone else, setting the stage for countless boss encounters. This thing definitely reeks of big bad guy, although I don't know what kind of DM would unleash such a presence on Earth. Back to the story though. Inside the Tsuchigumo were 1,990 skulls, 10 shy of 2,000. Unbelievable that it would eat so many and barely even digest the skulls. It's a little wasteful if you ask me. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Alp. This creature originates in German folklore and can cause you all sorts of terrible problems. Some liken it to a vampire, others to demons like the incubus. It will visit people at night and sit on their bodies, although they don't usually attempt to initiate sexual acts like incubi and succubi. If the person doesn't wake up, the Alp will often hop into their dreams and control what they see. It's not common for them to give people good dreams either. Nope, it's nightmares end to end. One of the many sleep paralysis demons that exist, the Alp tends to want to cause mischief in as many ways as possible. So it's not necessarily going to kill you or end your suffering anytime soon. It wants to keep the party going. Dream visits and nightmare manipulation are only part of what makes an Alp scary and annoying. It drinks blood from people's nipples and plays all sorts of heinous pranks, from spoiling milk to rediapering babies to tying up horses' tails into knots. These little gremlins are indeed the worst. and they can shapeshift too, so don't expect to just see a little goblin hopping around. It might be a little trickier than that. Don't count on reading Nilbog backwards to save your butt either. What a bag of fun they are. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Jormungand. This giant snake lives in the ocean surrounding Midgard. It is so large that it encompasses the entire world and then eats its own tail. As I previously mentioned, it's the sibling of Fenrir, which is kind of odd considering that one is a wolf and one is a snake, but hey, Loki definitely got around. Jormungand is famous for its rivalry with Thor. The two would engage in many legendary battles over the years. One of said tales has Thor fishing in the sea for the serpent. He snags it and starts pulling. As it gets closer to the surface, the giant Mimir becomes terrified. He sees Jormungand dribbling blood and poison and decides to cut the line, sending the snake back down to the depths. Thor was not happy about this development. Later on, of course, the two meet during Ragnarok. One telltale sign that Ragnarok is coming is the violent unrest of the seas. This happens because our slippery pal here has released his tail from his mouth and begins to flop onto land. Once this happens, it will spit poison to fill half the earth. The snake and the god do battle, with Thor emerging victorious but then succumbing to poison. Lose, fellas, that's not how we wanted this to go. Another fun fact about this gigantic serpent is that continental Germans used to attribute earthquakes to its movements, which is especially terrifying in context. Imagine you're a German peasant and an earthquake rolls through. Your house, rubble, your wife pancaked, your crops shaken, not stirred. And what explanation do you have? Oh, a snake bigger than anything you could ever imagine. Cool. Good. Glad to know that there's something just slithering around beneath us and could surface at any moment. Definitely not living the rest of my peasant life in crippling fear. And at number 1, we've got Balor. When your people have an eternal, mythological, supernaturally powerful enemy, life can be rough. Dealing with the leader of said eternal, mythological, supernatural group of entities can be really hard, and that's what Balor is. Leader of the Fomorians and a malevolent force beyond comprehension, this enormous eyeball has been described in myths and legends passed down from the first Celtic settlers. This demonic tribe constantly showed up, bringing the deadliest of natural forces along to cause doom and destruction all throughout Ireland. Plenty of battles were fought between these demons and the folks who just wanted to keep existing, but the deadliest of all is Balor. A gigantic fiend with strength beyond measure, Balor was a sight to behold. However, you didn't want to look directly at him. He had an enormous eyeball, rumored to be poisonous, that would turn the tide of any skirmish. It was so big, in fact, that it required a team of servants to manually open and close it. Anyone who he pointed said humongous eyeball at would perish, and this became a keystone weapon in the Fomorian arsenal. For ages, these demons dominated the Celtic settlers, forcing them back and preventing them from truly taking hold of the land. However, there was a prophecy that did not bode well for the demonic tribe. Apparently, his grandson would one day strike him down and dethrone the Fomorians in one decisive blow. This giant eye did everything that it could to prevent this from happening though. Hiding his daughter away to prevent her from ever bearing children, Balor was careful not to let any grandchildren make it onto the scene. However, a priestess managed to sneak a human hero into her quarters, and this man seduced the woman, resulting in triplets, only one of which survived. And wouldn't you know it, the surviving sibling grew up to be the heroic Lou Lamfada. Lou was an ace with the good old slingshot and managed to get his granddad right in the eye. Something about slingshots and giant eyeballs in mythology, eh? This bullseye was enough to down the legendary giant, forcing the rest of the Fomorians back into the sea, finally freeing the humans from years of terror. We haven't heard much from them since, so maybe they're waiting for another leader with a power as strong as the poisonous eye. But in the meantime, things seem to be pretty good in Ireland, you know, for now. Coming in at number 5, we've got Danny/Malfietor. Well, we'll kick it off pretty simple with a throwback to the horror movies of the 80s. Witchboard is a Ouija-themed romp through the mean streets of California, ranging from house parties to construction sites to an ever-infamous lake sequence. It's pretty cheesy, but there are definitely some good bits if you're into 80s horror. We kick off the introduction to evil presences with a good old-fashioned group session. While her boyfriend is off getting drunk, Linda gets her hands on her ex's Ouija board and summons a presence in front of a crowd, and that is not a euphemism. The partygoers meet Danny, a young boy who died a tragic death and is now communicating with everyone through the board. Things get heated between Linda's current and ex-boyfriends, which results in Danny slashing the tires of a car. Whoops. Danny's still a good kid though. The next day, Linda decides to call up Danny again and see how he's doing, but this time she brings out the board all alone without any guidance. Bad call, as the presence that shows up says he's Danny but is hiding his true identity. always a bad sign. The presence helps Linda find her engagement ring and never gets dismissed. This means it can stick around and do what it wants, wherever it wants, whenever it wants. And what it wants is to kill any and everyone who might get in its way. See, this presence that claimed to be Danny on the second day was actually that of Carlos Malfietor, an evil spirit. The man was an axe murderer in life, gunned down by police while trying to escape capture. As it turns out, he lived in Linda's house way back before she moved in. He'd been waiting for an opportunity to possess someone for ages, and this was the perfect time. Using progressive entrapment, he slowly but surely works towards being able to take over Linda and enter back into the living world. This results in plenty of death and destruction along the way, including almost getting her boyfriend arrested for the murders. So while you're using a Ouija board, do some research about where you're using it. If a bunch of nasty stuff occurred at your location, don't do it. Also keep an eye out for demons pretending to be other people. That one's a little harder to make sure of though. Coming in at number 4, we've got Kelly. This name doesn't sound so bad, but if you like your head to remain upon your shoulders, avoid it at all costs. Seriously though, this demon is sending out all of the warning signals possible, so if you end up dead, it really is your fault. She first showed up when a young lad was trying out Ouija with his older brother and cousin. They set up the board, got things ready to rock, and began to ask questions. With the lights out and candles lit, things were about to get spooky. And spooky things got. The young lad had a doll with him at the time, and this doll went by the name of Kelly. Uh-oh. Of course, it was good to have such a figure for comfort while doing something so potentially scary. So when the planchette started moving, he reached for his doll. However, Kelly was missing in action. Panicked, the kid looked back to the board and saw that it was spelling something. K-E-L-L-Y. Oh my goodness. Soon after, the ritual ended and the boys were considerably shaken. The youngest one looked frantically for his doll, but to no avail. However, later she was found, without her head. Someone or something had taken the doll, popped its dome off, and hidden the pieces away. If you ask me, this is a kind of warning, a sign of things to come. The next time you try to use a Ouija board around here, the demon might spell your name. And then your head might go missing. Not the kind of injury that's easy to recover from, yeah? Coming in at number 3, we've got Doris. Back to some movie magic for a moment, Doris is the exceptionally upsetting demon featured in Blumhouse's Ouija series. She turned out to be the main villain in the first one, and then the prequel explores her tragic backstory. Demons with sad stories are always the worst, eh? You want to sympathize with them, but then they're out here trying to kill everyone and singing sad songs. It's a whole mess. Doris had her mouth sewed shut by her mother to prevent evil spirits and voices from taking over, and eventually passed on, becoming one of these presences summoned by the board. Once she became a demon, Doris possessed many people. Anyone foolish enough to summon her using a board would be taken over and killed in horrific ways. Doris will make people hang from Christmas lights by their own doing, or put their heads through porcelain sinks. That's gotta hurt, and there's no coming back from that kind of head trauma. There's some swimming pool antics, some stitch-mouthed ghost antics, the whole 9 yards. Even though Doris was just a girl, as a demon she has a whole lot of anger and terror to express. And what better way to express your demonic urges than through a killing spree? Sounds like fun. So if you'd like to keep your bathroom pristine and your head unmunched, stay away from that Ouija board. Coming in at number 2, we've got Shush. This one comes from another supposedly true tale where average folks messed with a board and paid the price. Everyone knows how embarrassing it can be to be shushed, especially by a stranger. So what about a paranormal stranger? One with the potential to shut you up for good? It doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun if I'm being totally honest, but that's exactly what happened here. Two friends decided to take a swing at some Ouija board antics and plopped one down on their table. They tried for a little while to contact any sort of presence, but came up short. After asking a few more questions, they returned to the top, asking questions like, "Is there anyone here that would like to communicate with us?" This apparently was the last straw, as the planchette immediately moved to no. Thinking this was their chance to finally talk with someone from the other side, they pushed further, asking more questions. But the presence did not appreciate this and used the planchette to spell out S-H-U-S-H. Shush. Holy moly, it just wanted some peace and quiet. After this, the room felt considerably colder, and the pals didn't want to see what would happen if they didn't follow the presence's instructions. Something tells me it wouldn't have been pleasant. I could see a demon stealing someone's voice, or permanently sealing their mouth for not being quiet when told. So who wants to play the quiet game? I'll start. Coming at number 1, we've got Zozo. Now, you know we couldn't do a Ouija demon list without including one of the newest and most prolific entries into the ghostly pop culture oeuvre. Zozo seemingly hasn't been around that long, and his popularity is largely attributed to internet culture gassing him up. There might be brief mentions of this demon in assorted old compendiums and grimoires, but nothing concrete, and the old writings don't really connect him to Ouija boards or possession either. But Zozo is a famous demon now, and those tend to do exactly what people expect them to do. The more we discuss him, the stronger and more bold he grows. Many who have encountered this demon feel its presence for years after the fact, regardless of whether they close the session or not. One tale recounts a man almost seeing his drown in the bathtub, attacked by Zozo. Others say that the demon acts like a poltergeist, ruining their homes and injuring them frequently. If your planchette moves from Z to O to Z to O, yes, I am Canadian, say goodbye and throw it in a fire. Nothing good will come from any further interaction. Coming at number 5, we've got Berchta. We love to recoil from hags, don't we? In stories old and new, there always seems to be this image of an old hideous woman with dark powers and even darker intentions. The old crone, the dastardly spinster, the evil witch dwelling deep within the woods. It's a classic trope and one that really resonates with a lot of people. Aging itself is pretty spooky, and most folks, especially young ones, don't like to be reminded that we'll end up like that someday. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you're gonna be on about 50 different medications by that time. Berchta takes full advantage of the spooky qualities of an ancient witch and causes problems 24/7. In fact, she's so spooky that many parents like to use her as a vague threat when their children are misbehaving. Some things never change. Berchta appears as an old, shriveled up hag, hunched over with beady eyes, a hooked nose, and a head of greasy, stringy hair. Classic fairy tale witch appearance. This image alone is enough to scare some kids into compliance, but the story that comes along with her is much more disturbing. She's a bit like a malevolent Santa Claus, promising to bring gifts to all the good little boys and girls, especially ones that cook delicious meals for her. However, the punishment for naughty children is not just replacing a nice gift with one of coal. No, she's not so forgiving. If she finds that the meals left out for her are unsatisfactory, she gets really upset, and when Berchta is upset, she gets slashy. Stomach slashy. She'll disembowel the offending parties and then stitch their stomachs back up with chains. Not thread, not sinew, chains. A very metal experience, I'm sure, but that's not a fate that anyone wants to fall to. So be good, learn some new recipes, and pray that this ghastly crone opts to visit a different village this year. Not everyone can pull off the mutilated belly look. Coming at number 4, we've got La Llorona. Don't get it twisted. This demon wasn't created just to star in a Conjuring series spin-off. There is some real history surrounding this particular demon, even though it gets the Hollywood treatment akin to Annabelle. At least they didn't make this one out of porcelain when the original was a Raggedy Ann. Putting aside the movie for now, let's take a look at the origins of this demon. Originating in Mexico, this is a tragic tale indeed, one of love, loss, and loneliness. All things that tend to result in demons roaming the earth, which makes it very tough to be a human with normal emotions. There was once a woman who fell in love with a man. She wanted nothing more than to be with him, but he would not reciprocate these feelings, partially because this woman already had children of her own. In a fit of madness, she took her children down to the river and drowned them. After this, she went back and attempted to make the man love her once more, but unsurprisingly, he did not. At that moment, she realized the grave nature of her actions. Weeping loudly, she went down to the water and cast herself into its murky depths. Being so distraught, combined with her deplorable actions, this woman was unable to move on to the afterlife. So her spirit haunts the waters, loudly weeping in the night. She forgets how she got there too, which results in a lot of questionable behavior. For starters, she believes that any children near the water are her own. This can't be true, of course, as she drowned those herself. However, she seems to forget a lot of the things she did in life and only retains that sorrow, longing for her children. If she gets her hands on kids near the water though, she does not caress them. She does not feed them cookies or sing them songs. The madness returns and she drowns these new victims. Yikes. People interact with this demon in a few different ways, often trying to spot her down by the water at night, but the legend spread further and the stories changed from telling to telling. Some even treat her as a Bloody Mary type character, able to be summoned by chanting her name in front of a darkened mirror. Regardless of the story you subscribe to, there's no denying the terrifying appeal of an entity like this, lost in their own mind, looking to take back what they so viciously threw away many years ago. Coming at number 3, we've got Ben Air. Water tends to be the source of terror across all sorts of cultures, and that isn't limited to the larger bodies either. From oceans to lakes to rivers to streams, these natural sources of liquid and life are often the birthplace of unholy abominations as well. Some are truly eldritch in their forms, while others appear harmless. At first, anyway. This Scottish legend seems to just be a kindly old woman washing her clothes in a stream. Sometimes referred to as the little washer by the ford, it's easy to see how she might trick someone into feeling safe. She's said to be washing the bloodied clothes of someone who will soon die, and if you run into her, your days are numbered. A portent of doom, a sign of things to come, the Ben-Air is a symbol of impending disaster. She'll be wearing green, have webbed feet, and won't often be doing anything other than washing. If you spot her and she spots you, she'll whip at you with whatever garment she's washing, locker room style. One good lick with this improvised weapon could break bones, no problem. But if you manage to sneak your way to the water without her noticing, she'll allow you to ask for 3 wishes. They're not free though. In order to cash in on a wish, you must answer a question she poses totally honestly. And they're not often easy questions. So if you're ready to stealth your way to a deadly washerwoman and you're prepared to lay your soul bare, this could be an interesting demon to encounter. Coming in at number 2, we've got Poroscoro. Many demons are created through unexpected avenues. In many myths, legends, and tales of yore, strange meetings between gods and other creatures give way to awful presences. You wouldn't think that forces of good and evil would come together like that, but the world is an unpredictable place. In the Romani tale of Poroscoro, the demon king and the queen of Fae managed to link up at some point. The fairy queen's servants attempted to make a cake of all sorts of hellish materials in order to keep the demon king away, but to no avail. Soon after that, Poroscoro was born. With the body of a human, 3 cat heads, 4 dog heads, and a tail made of a snake, he's quite the sight to behold. He's also extra scary to us these days, as pandemics are his specialty. He and his many children run amok, spreading deadly diseases in any way they see fit. The worst of all are those spread by parasites too. All in all, a gross, dangerous, and upsetting creature. And coming in at number 1, we've got the Jinn. This is a bit of a broad way to refer to these demons, as there are many specific varieties of Jinn, and many take on names of their very own. But we'll do a top-down look at these ancient demons today. The Jinn were originally considered manifestations of the wilder aspects of life, things that humans couldn't take over and subdue, but in a more corporeal form. Whether these creatures were gods, demons, or something else entirely was contested, although with time, Jinn took on a more malevolent form. These demons could shapeshift, appearing as humanoids with animal features, often switching between appearances. They often partook in biblical angel behavior as well, looking to interact and interface with humans thanks to flaws in their nature. The ones who did end up doing this were punished by other deities for doing so, and often ended up more evil than when they started. They came to embody certain taboo behaviors and even managed to become synonymous with possession. And of course, there are also the ghoul, but we'll save those for another day.
Number 5 on this list is El Chupacabra. You guys should know who El Chupacabra is by this point, considering we've talked about this creature tons on this channel before. Basically, it is a legendary creature in the Central Americas that's said to drink the blood of livestock. Although this creature seems like it's probably fake, it might be real, just not exactly how we might expect it to be. Carolyn Beccia says, "We are taught from an early age, don't approach scary looking dogs. And while no one can get a clear picture of Bigfoot, the Kraken, or the Loch Ness Monster, there is one monster that is oddly not camera shy, the legendary El Chupacabra. The Chupacabra was first sighted in Puerto Rico in the 70s. A wave of sightings followed in the late 1990s. During this time, livestock throughout Puerto Rico was found drained of blood. These Chupacabra, or goat sucker attacks, caused panic with local residents who claimed a vampire was feeding on their livestock. Although descriptions have varied, most describe a hairless, alien-like monster with spikes going down its back and glowing red eyes. It sounds dubious, but how could so many people be taking pictures of the same ugly dog-like creature? The answer may be one found in science. One plausible theory is that these creatures are coyotes suffering from sarcoptic mange, an inflammatory skin condition caused caused by the itch-inducing parasite mite scabies. Wolves, dogs, and coyotes infected with scabies will have extreme hair loss, skin shriveling, and constricted blood vessels that can lead to life-threatening fatigue. And while usually a coyote or wolf will have no problems hunting prey, once infected by sarcoptic mange, coyotes may choose to hunt more available meals such as livestock. So it's actually possible that this creature is real, it's just not what we thought at all. I know that this takes away from some of the mystery and lore around it, but ultimately this would make a lot of sense. When you think about it, what's more likely? A space alien comes crashing to Earth and starts sucking the blood of our livestock, or some coyotes get a disease and start doing it instead? I tend to side with the coyotes. Either way though, that doesn't make these coyotes nice or friendly or approachable. Still treat them like you would a chupacabra. With caution. Number 4 on this list is the Stymphalian birds. We gotta go all the way back to ancient Greece for this one. Caroline Beccia says, one of Hercules' labors was to kill the Stymphalian birds, man-eating birds who had the peculiar habit of throwing dung. The Greeks were not the only ones who liked to scare their youngsters with killer bird tales. The Maori tribe of New Zealand told similar legends of the Pokie or Haikoi, a giant black and white bird that swooped down from the sky to pick off small children. Scientists today know that these thunderbirds existed. Called Haast's eagle, the bird stood over 6 feet tall and had a wingspan of over 8 feet. The Haast eagle would sit atop trees and then ambush its prey by swooping down at 60-mile-per-hour speeds. Then it would disembowel its meal with sharp talons before the poor slob could even worry about dung throwing. Hercules would never have survived these hellbirds, but you can sleep well tonight. The Haast's eagle went extinct around the 15th century. Anything that could annihilate Hercules would definitely be a no-go for me, guys. That dude was literally a demigod, and if these guys could have beaten him, then we wouldn't have stood a chance. Lucky for us, they are extinct now, but for the people back then, they would have had their hands full with these creatures. If, of course, they still had hands and the beast hadn't ripped them off yet. Number 3 on this list is the Kraken. We have one of the most famous folklore creatures here, guys, that as we know now, turned out to be real. The Kraken was especially big in Norse culture. All of those people up there in the Nordic regions feared this wicked beast, as it was said to be able to pull down entire ships with hundreds of men on board. Instances where exactly that happened did actually transpire. Ships with tons of people on them that were literally made for battle would be out on the water, and then boom, Kraken attack and they're toasted. Except it wasn't really the Kraken now, was it? The Kraken looks very similar to an actual animal that we have in our world that is also super deadly and really strong. The giant squid. Giant squids, in case you couldn't tell from the name, are giant. They're pretty big. They are so big actually they would have had the capability to take down an old ship like this. In fact, we've even seen these beasts do some serious damage to submarines, and they're made of metal. They easily could have sunk a wooden boat from hundreds or thousands of years ago. And if you were a sailor on said wooden boat and you saw this massive creature with several tentacles sucking you to the bottom of the ocean, then you would probably exaggerate what happened as well too. It's very easy to see how the legend of the Kraken got started and started to snowball as more encounters with the giant squid happened. I'm glad that the Kraken isn't technically real, because the giant squid is already bad enough. Number 2 on this list is the Charybdis. What was initially thought to be a folkloric creature may have been real, but not exactly in the way that we might think. Caroline Beccia says, nothing is more frightening than being sucked underwater by a whirlpool that feeds on human flesh 3 times a day. The Charybdis first appeared in Homer's Odyssey. During this epic tale, Odysseus must sail between the 6-headed sea monster Scylla and the flesh-eating whirlpool Charybdis. These 2 dueling sea monsters attacked in intervals much like a whirlpool's regular intervals of tidal activity. It sounds terrifying, but whirlpools that pull ships underwater really do happen. Known today as Garofalo, one is found in the strait between Italy's mainland land in Sicily. Garofalo occurs when winds blow across the strait in opposition to the tides. This makes it technically not a whirlpool because there's no circular motion, but it does have the ability to wreak havoc on ships and pull humans into a watery grave. So this deadly creature was real, it just ended up not being a creature at all. Back in the times when these stories were written, there would have been many folklore legends about evil sea monsters that could pull brave sailors into the sea. The reality of the situation is though that the ships we had back then kinda sucked, and it was a lot easier for the weather and other conditions to sink the ships. That's why there were so many legends of monsters coming from the ocean for so long. Finally, number 1 on this list is the incubus demon. This demon is an evil demon who is thought to sneak into your home and have sexual relations with you as you're sleeping. This creature is real in a sense. It just so happens that it's actually in our minds. During the witch hunt craze of the 16th and 17th century, people had some really messed up ideas on how human reproduction occurred. One way was for a demon to steal a man's seed and impregnate a helpless woman during her sleep. The monster that stole the precious sperm was called a succubus, and the monster that implanted the sperm was called an incubus. The incubus would sit on top of your chest while you slept, making it impossible for you to move if you woke. Sort of like being assaulted by a possessed sexomniac. But before you condemn medieval people as crazed horn dogs trying to attack innocent women, there is a scientific basis for believing in such monsters. The condition is called sleep paralysis. During sleep paralysis, you are fully awake but cannot move or cry for help. It feels like you've had a stroke, but although it's terrifying, sleep paralysis is harmless. Most sleep experts attribute it to being caught between REM, rapid eye movement, and NREM, non-rapid eye movement sleep. Either way, before sleep stages were understood, we can see how our ancestors would have thought it was a demon sitting on your chest. So literally this demon creature that apparently attacked people was never real at all, it just felt extremely real from our minds. I've experienced sleep paralysis before, and although I didn't experience any demon thing, I can 100% see how people would have believed this back then. It could definitely have felt like that and would have got people on the lookout for this sick and twisted demon of the night. Number 5 on this list is the Culebron. I'd never heard of this legend before, and I have to admit that it's pretty cool. This creature is native to Chile, and although it'd be pretty neat to look at from afar, it's definitely very dangerous. Scoop Whoop says El Culebron is basically an enormous hairy snake with a gigantic calf-like head. It's said that the creature resides inside of dark caves or remote forests, and it eats basically anything in its path. Legend also has it that the snake can draw wealth to anyone who's able to domesticate it, but trapping a Culebron is no easy feat. You have to find one in the wild, pluck 3 of its longest hair strands without getting eaten, and then put it in a bowl of milk. From that bowl, 3 baby Culebron will spring to life, and the strongest will eat the other 2 and become a full-fledged Culebron. From that point forward, owners have to maintain the snakes with sacrifices of animals or close relatives and leave the blood in a secret location that only the snake knows of. A very unique legend if you ask me. A very deadly, giant snake creature that has the ability to bring you great wealth, but only if you can breed one and domesticate it. The story that I read off doesn't go into deep detail on how they actually bring you wealth, which would definitely be of interest to me. Maybe they're kind of like truffle-sniffing pigs, except instead of truffles, they can smell gold or rare gems or something like that. Probably the reason that we don't know for sure how they bring us wealth is because so few have actually been able to be domesticated. First off, finding one of these creatures would be very hard, because it means you'd need to trek through the jungles and mountains of Chile. Then, after finding one of the rarest creatures in the world, you also need to fight one of the most deadly creatures in the world and pluck 3 hair strands off of it. Then you need to fully domesticate another one of these beasts in your home after you grow it from a bowl of milk. There is a lot of room for error here, guys, and I doubt that many people have been able to complete all of the steps. Keep an eye out though for the El Culebron if you find yourself in Chile. Number 4 on this list is La Llorona. La Llorona is also known to many as the Weeping Woman. She is the ghostly apparition of a vengeful spirit who roams around by the water bemoaning the loss of her children whom she'd actually drowned herself. Scoop Whoop writes, according to a popular version of the tale, the Weeping Woman was once a beautiful maiden named Maria. She married a nobleman and gave birth to 2 sons. Her husband was a traveler and he rarely visited home. During their time apart, his feelings for her began to dull, but her husband still loved his sons and gave them all the attention that he left his wife bereft of. Once when he was in town, she caught him with a younger woman. Enraged, she took her sons to Santa Fe River and drowned them. She also was found dead on the riverbank a few days later, the cause of which remained unknown. It's said that when she reached heaven, she was denied entry until she found the souls of her sons. Thus, she wanders the earth looking to reclaim their souls. Dressed in a white gown and mourning for her sons, La Llorona takes lost and abandoned children and drowns them in hopes of recovering souls that will allow her entry into the afterlife. What an absolutely horrible woman. Clearly killing her own children really didn't teach her anything at all, because now she's out there killing other people's children. This is a really scary legend in Mexico, and it's often why parents don't let their children go to areas with water by themselves. There's also the fear that La Llorona will be lurking somewhere around there thinking that she can use the souls of the young children instead of her own. You'd think that she would have realized by now that faking the souls of other people to get into heaven isn't gonna work, but by the sounds of it, she really doesn't sound like the brightest bulb in the bunch. Bright or not, she's still very dangerous, so be very careful whenever you're around water in Latin America. Number 3 on this list is La Ciguepa. La Ciguepa are interesting mythical creatures that are located in the Dominican Republic. They can be found in forests and around the rivers and lakes of the country. At first glance, they may look like a woman with long hair. However, upon closer inspection, one will see very unique characteristics. Their backwards facing feet. That's right guys, their feet actually face towards their own body, and this is one of the main differences between this creature and your standard human. Many people haven't paid close enough attention to this detail, and because of that have been tricked into thinking that this is an actual woman. A fatal mistake if one of these things decides that you'd make for some good prey. The typical target of this creature are men that find themselves exploring the forest. These creatures are said to be incredibly smart and can often outwit the people that they run into. Also, rather surprisingly, their backwards feet make them run very fast, so even if you do catch on to this creature's intentions, running away would be very hard to do. The earliest mention of this creature was back in 1866, and since then there have been many stories written about these creatures. Those lucky enough to have an interaction and then make it out alive have documented their findings and tried to warn others from wandering into the forests unarmed. Sadly, these warnings aren't always heeded, and many men have disappeared over the years, never to be heard of again. Trekking through the lush forests of the Dominican Republic is already dangerous as is and requires lots of planning. Just don't forget to also plan for the La Ciguepa if you do find yourself in this country. Number 2 on this list is the Yakumama. Ever seen the movie Anaconda? 1997 movie with J-Lo and Owen Wilson, all about a super massive snake that starts hunting this filmmaker? Well, I wouldn't be shocked if that snake was based off of the legend of the Yakumama. Cryptid Wiki says the Yakumama is a large snake up to 60 meters in length that is said to inhabit the Amazon River basin. Local shamans say that the Yakumama travels to an area called the Boiling River. In the local legends, the Yakumama is said to be the mother of all marine life. It has the ability to suck up any living thing that passed within 100 paces. The locals would blow on a conch horn before entering the river, believing after hearing the noise, the serpent would reveal itself if it was in the area. I can't describe to you guys how massive 60 meters in length would actually be. Titanoboa was an ancient creature that actually existed in the Amazon. It was a massive snake, the biggest the world has ever seen, that ruled over these parts and could swallow crocodiles whole. That creature at its max would grow up to 50 feet in length or 15 meters. So basically, Yakumama is 4 times the size of the biggest and deadliest snake that's ever lived. This thing would be able to annihilate hundreds of humans at once. Even if the locals did blow on their conch and the snake did reveal itself, then there would literally be nothing that they could do. It would just eat them all, and that would be that. Snakes are super cool, but not when they're 60 meters long and looking to devour me. Number 1 on this list is the Puchin. Putchen are very dangerous and deadly beasts and should not be underestimated under any circumstances. Cryptid Wiki says, the Putchen, a creature from the Mapuche mythology and Chilote mythology pertaining to southern Chile, was a feared shapeshifter which could instantly change into anything. It's often been described as a gigantic flying snake that produced strange whistling sounds, while its gaze could paralyze an intended victim and permit it to suck its blood. It's often been reported as sucking blood from sheep. The creature can be eliminated by a maki. So maki, in case you aren't familiar, are medicine women, and they're believed to be the only people capable of defeating this beast. Meaning that you could be the strongest warrior in the world, you could have taken down beasts and enemies in the hundreds before, but you would still fall to the Putchen if you weren't a maki. It's extremely hard to kill something if you can't even look at it, and that's what this is like. Similar to Medusa in the way that it can paralyze you if you look at it, fighting this beast is near impossible. Aside from its ability to paralyze people, it's also extremely fast, extremely strong, it can fly, and it can also shapeshift into other dangerous creatures. Pray that you never run into this creature, because it will assuredly be the last thing that you ever do.
In at number 5 we have Ong Babi. The Ong Babi is considered to be the Vietnamese version of the boogeyman and is said to have originated in the 17th century. The story of the boogeyman is told throughout the world in many different ways, but in Vietnam is the Ong Babi that brings fear to children, and parents use it to scare their children into behaving. Many parents in Vietnam threaten their children saying things like "stop crying" or "Ong Babi will come and take you," or "eat your broccoli" or "I'll call Ong Babi." The boogeyman in general doesn't have any specific appearance, and conceptions vary drastically by household and culture. But the Ong Babi is described as an old, rugged man carrying 3 sacks, has 12 eyes, and he likes to kidnap naughty children using and putting them into his sack. When looking at the personality traits of the boogeyman, they are divided into 3 categories. One being the kind that punishes misbehaved children, the kind that are more prone to violence, and the kind that protect the innocent. They all relate in the same way, being that they all exist to teach young children lessons. And that's why the boogeyman is directly related to Ong Babi, because they are both there to frighten children with punishment and to steal them at night and sometimes even eat them. The Ong Babi only ever comes at night and only kidnaps the children who are misbehaving and not listening to their parents. This so-called mythical creature is said to be invented by parents in order to scare children when they are disobedient and scaring them into having good behavior. Another account says that it was invented based on events happening in the 17th century when starvation ran rapid through Vietnam, and it drove many people into kidnapping children to sell for food, and the Ong Babi is based on those events. Whichever the case, many know these tales regardless of where you're from, and the story of Ong Babi is told by parents to children to this day and is a very fearsome figure to children in Vietnam. Coming in at number 4 we have Ma Da. Children living in areas close to the river are warned about Ma Da, which are vengeful spirits who lurk in bodies of water. They're believed to be the souls of drowned victims that tend to have a childlike appearance, and they manifest as bloated corpses with weeds for hair. It's believed these souls died in torment and they cannot find peace and can only be reincarnated if there is another to take their place. The Ma Da roam in lakes and rivers waiting to drag down unsuspecting swimmers, but it's believed that this is most likely made up to warn children to not go swimming unsupervised, because many fatal water-related accidents are very common in Vietnam. Many happenings and stories of the Ma Da come from the infamous Tu Lich, otherwise known as the Cursed River. Back in September 2001, while working to take out some of the excessive mud and trash build-up in the river, a construction team uncovered several wooden piles arranged in a strange formation, including ceramic relics, metal utensils, and even bones from human skeletons. The odd occurrence even made headlines on many different newspapers at the time, but had eventually died down. Several years later, in 2007, the happenings came up again when Mr. Nighe Hung Quang, the leader of the construction team, recounting many misfortunes that had happened to him, and others who were related to the project since 2001. Some of the things that happened to these men included experiencing nightmares in which they were haunted by ghosts, feelings of being drowned, as well as health issues such as epileptic seizures and other accidents happening to the men's families. Mr. Nunjian even invited a monk to perform a ritual to lift the curse on the river, but the attempt was unsuccessful, and the monk died shortly after visiting. In at number 3 we have Quy Nhap Trang. The Quy Nhap Trang tend to possess the bodies of the recently deceased. Legend has it that when someone passes away and is prepared for burial, it is extremely important to not let a black cat, which is a symbol of bad luck, leap over the coffin. If that does happen, then the body of the deceased will be infested by evil spirits, which then turns into Quy Nhap Trang and chases the living. Other stories claim Quy Nhap Trang are spirits of the dead who prey on the frail, dying people, seeking to consume their souls and steal their bodies so they can indulge in earthly pleasures. Older victims are much easier to manipulate and possess, and they are close enough to death even when they do end up passing away. The Quy Nhap Trang stays in their bodies and can live on in that body, enjoy their life on Earth. When it inhabits the elderly, they seem to appear reinvigorated but also start to act strangely. Some of the weird things these revived humans do are they ask for lots of food, and very specific foods to feed on, like raw blood and even living animals. These odd behaviors are mistaken for signs of recovery, which why Quy Nhap Trang can live among the living normally for a few days or even weeks before people start noticing the strange behavior. Obviously, this person is already dead and their body is taken over and possessed by this demon, and the only way for the Quy Nhap Trang to exit the body is by an exorcism, and then once the evil spirit is expelled, the body will immediately show signs of decay, as if it's been dead for days. Some believe that this legend is exaggerated accounts of the incidents where someone is wrongfully declared dead and wakes up suddenly during their funeral, which is terrifying. In at number 2, Malfietor. Malfietor is said to be one of the most terrifying creatures in the Vietnamese folklore. By daytime, they are said to walk among us disguised as women, usually looking young, very beautiful, and often appearing tired. I'm always tired. At night, though, it's said that their heads detach from their bodies. They are seen dragging bloody organs alongside them and float around to feast on flesh, organs, and other rancid items. It is also believed that someone whose excrement is consumed by a Malay is cursed with eternal hunger and will eventually die of starvation no matter how much they eat. When sunrise comes, they must return to their human body again, otherwise they'll be burned to death by the sunlight. So the easiest way to vanquish a Malay is to hide their desired body so that she can't reattach her head. Apparently, the Malay story originated from when a woman, believed to be cursed, engaged in various sins and fraudulent activities during her previous life. Then after she died, her sins caused her to be reborn as a horrific demon who lives off dead animals, their organs, excrement, and garbage. There have been many different sightings throughout the 21st century, including strange red lights floating up and down a field in 2016, and then again in 2016 villagers saw strange green and red lights rising up and down in the distance, and people thought it was the Malay due to her glowing appearance when she floats through the night. There have also been videos and pictures seen all over social media believing to be the Malay, showing glowing figures hovering around the night sky, and eyewitnesses capturing these sightings, and people have no explanation for them. Similar creatures as the Malay can be seen in the folklore of many other Southeast Asian countries, including Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia, where they are known as the other names such as Ap, Krasu, or Penanjal, but they all relate back to Malay. And finally, in at number 1, we have Than Trung. The Than Trung are evil spirits who torture the souls of the dead. These spirits usually appear as either massive black birds with blood-red beaks, or they have massive bird-shaped heads with human-like bodies and glowing red eyes. They also have large wings which help them fly, and they stay close to cemeteries and sit on mountain peaks to have a better view to seek out their next prey, and are able to see who is being buried at each cemetery. They often appear after someone passes away and is newly buried, and they show up next to the new grave. It is said that they torture the newly dead people's souls for information about their living relatives, then the Than Trung hunts down their relatives and reap the souls of those living people, leading to several family members dying within a short period of one another. Apparently, the Than Trung must get to the newly buried person within 49 days or they cannot summon their soul. There is even a horror game that came out called The Death Than Trung, which is based off the folklore and was created and developed by Dong Si T and some member of Team Dut in 2021. The game is a first-person psychological horror adventure game that is highly inspired by the demon folklore. The game revolves around the story of a young man who was stuck in an endless nightmare at his inn, and the black and red are the main color tones in the game. It takes place in the city of Hanoi in 2021 and heavily involves the Than Trung and their reign of terror.
Coming in number 5, we've got the Rat Men of Southend. Who could forget Dear Rat Boy, am I right? Well, if you forgot him before, prepare to have some imagery burned into your brain for life. There are actually a couple of tales referring to a rat man from Southend, so why not talk about both? The first is a little more fun and a little less tragic. Tragic nonetheless, but more juicy details and less cold-blooded murder. So according to some, at one point, the mayor of Southend was indeed a rat bastard. Not literally, but in the way that he constantly and unrepentantly cheated on his wife. Poor woman, although she did choose to marry a politician. So as divine punishment for this mayor's consistent adultery, his son was born with a rat face and a long tail. This did not sit well with the social climbing couple, but what could they do? For a while they would feed their son the only thing he craved, meat. This rat boy would chow down on raw flesh like nobody else. Eventually, they realized they couldn't possibly raise a meat-eating rat lad in full view of the public, so the mayor had an underpass with secret chambers built just for his rat son. And for the rest of his days, Rat Boy lived in the dank, dark underpass, attempting escape and scaring anyone who dared pass through. He eventually grew into a rat man in his own right, and even killed a few folks for food. The legend persists, with some night tours insisting that they stroll the underpass in case he decides to come out at night. Yeesh. The second story has more to do with the man and also rats, but I'll tell it anyway. Apparently there was an old man also living below an underpass. He had no belongings save for his clothes and a blanket, and he did his best to stay hidden away. However, one day a group of rowdy teenagers came across this man and mercilessly beat him. Once he was incapacitated, they stole his blanket and left him to die in the cold. Unable to move due to his injuries, the man eventually did succumb to hypothermia. Following his death, hundreds of rats emerged from the shadows to consume his lifeless body. Thus began the legend of the Rat Man, consumed by the scurrying dark masses that plague the city. Some say that you can still hear strange scrabbly noises near that underpass. Could it be the descendants of those rats looking for more human flesh? Or maybe it's the ghost of the Rat Man himself, crawling around, disemboweled and confused. Coming in number 4, we've got fairy dogs. Doesn't that just sound lovely? Like a little dachshund puppy with little Tinkerbell wings? Well, that is not what these fairies are like. Of course, the fairies that folks see in Disney movies are much friendlier than the ones from folklore. Fairies of legend are often mischievous, looking to cause trouble in best case scenarios and trying to ruin people in harsher cases. So it stands to reason that fairy dogs might not be so sociable. No belly rubs or ear scratches will make these fearsome canines friendly. See, there's an idea out there that crossroads are the door to another world. If you make the wrong choice or linger too long, you might find yourself staring down a fairy, a demon, or a god. Not necessarily what the average person wants, you know? These otherworldly beings usually live their lives unseen and unsensed by us, but at crossroads their actions might become more apparent. Some crossroads might even feature a fairy dog or two. These four-legged fiends guard the entrance. They're known for glowing bright green, making sure you don't mistake them for a regular dog. And if you see one, it's best to turn around. They'll bark twice as a warning. Alright, 2, remember that. And don't worry if you think you might miss one of these barks, they're as loud and commanding as they come. But if you do not heed this warning and the dog gets out a third bark, you are doomed. Sure, good things come in threes, just not this time. Hey guys, if you're liking the video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, it really helps us with the algorithm. On with the list. Coming in number 3, we've got the knocker. You would think that mining is scary enough as is, right? Heading into underground tunnels to blast away at rocks until you find some useful materials, hopefully not getting caved in, probably not running out of oxygen, etc. Well, this dangerous career comes with its own share of folklore too, just to make sure that some unexplainable spooks become even spookier. The knocker is a mining monster. Based on the sounds of underground work, it is a spirit that lives within the same tunnels that the helmet-wearing workers descend into every day. Apparently the knocker is the ghost of a tin miner. It's 2 feet tall with a big head, long beard, and arms that almost drag along the ground. Being the ghost of a miner, it carries all the necessary equipment from lamps to pickaxes. Folks familiar with mining might know about the knocking sounds that echo throughout. This is a very scary sound as it can often be indicative of a cave-in. The actual knocking came from the creaking of earth and timbers before giving way, but to some of the miners the noise came from these malevolent spirits attempting to knock down the walls. There are actually all sorts of knocker-related tales, ranging from benevolent to malevolent, but sometimes remaining largely benign. But the scariest additions are those who went around the different tunnels stealing equipment and food, leaving the miners in terrible situations. Sometimes they would even purposefully misdirect miners, leaving them lost in the labyrinth of mine shafts and passages. Worst of all, they're associated with mine fires, which are absolutely horrifying. So make sure you toss the last bite of your meat pie into the mine for the knockers, lest you find yourself in a whole world of trouble. Coming in at number 2, we've got boggarts. Nasty, nasty creatures these ones are. A lot of folks are familiar with them thanks to the Harry Potter universe, but the idea of rotten little buggers ruining everything has been around for a lot longer than that. Household spirits looking to cause as much trouble as possible, boggarts are something nobody ever wants to deal with. They're famous for making possessions disappear, causing milk to sour, and having dogs walk lame. Definitely not fun. And once you've found yourself in the upsetting company of one, good luck getting rid of it. They will stick with your family no matter where you go, no matter how far you run. Your things will keep disappearing, your food will keep going bad, and you'll always be haunted by the knowledge that an awful little is making all of it happening. But don't even think about reasoning with a boggart. Sure, they were once helpful brownies or silkies, but something offended them or caused them to feel mistreated, and now they are just pure bad. Even if you offer to make a deal or treat it nicely from now on, it will respond very negatively. It will get furious and wreck all of your stuff in one go instead of doing it mischievously over the course of many years. So yeah, it's like a poltergeist you can't escape, but somehow worse. Folks that have to deal with these, not happy folks. And finally at number 1, we've got Black Shuck. We've talked about fairy dogs earlier, but that was just the beginning. This is the true terror dog, the big, brutal bad boy, the canine carnivore fueled by carnage, a hate-eyed and vengeful black dog full of rage and malice. There are all sorts of variants based on where you are, from the Gargess to the Guy Trash to the Padfoot, but the best known is Black Shuck. See it and you are out of luck. This thing is the embodiment of Satan. Wherever it goes, destruction follows. A harbinger of doom with blazing red eyes. If you see one, you are supposed to hide or make sure not to look at it. If you neglect to avert your gaze, your luck will get so bad that you die within the year. Holy smokes, right? There's one tale from a Suffolk church that tells of a Black Shuck visit during 1577. The enormous dog came running in, killed a man and a boy, and caused the steeple to collapse through the roof. It then left in a hurry, leaving dark scorch marks on the door. And that was just one little tale. Even if you're a dog person, you do not want to run into one of these. Something tells me that a treat won't smooth things over.
Coming in at number 5, Cyclops. I mean, we can't have a giant creature list without including one of the most infamous giants in history, Cyclops. Hailing from Greek mythology and then later Roman mythology, the Cyclops were giant one-eyed creatures who can be distinguished in 3 groups. In Hesiod's theogony, they're the brothers Brontes, Steropus, and Argus, I think, who provided Zeus with his weapon, the Thunderbolt. In Homer's Odyssey, they are an uncivilized group of shepherds, the brethren of Polyphemus encountered by Odysseus. Cyclopses were also famous as the builders of the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae and Tyrannus. For the sake of avoiding confusion, let's focus our attention to the Homeric Cyclopses. In an episode of Homer's Odyssey, the hero Odysseus encounters the Cyclops Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, a one-eyed man-eating giant who lives with his fellow Cyclopses in a distant land. They live in the world of men rather than among the gods. Homeric Cyclopses are presented as uncivilized shepherds, savages, and have no regard for Zeus. They live solitary lives and have no government. They are said to be inhospitable to strangers, slaughtering and eating all who come to their land. Coming in at number 4, Corb or the Fomorians. The Fomorians are a supernatural race in Irish mythology, often portrayed as hostile and monstrous beings who come from under the sea or the earth. However, later they were portrayed as giants and sea raiders and enemies of Ireland's first settlers. They appear to have once been gods who represent the harmful or destructive powers of nature, personifications of chaos, darkness, death, blight, and drought. In Old and Middle Irish, the race is typically called the Fomor or Fomori, with an individual member being called a Fomor. They are often regarded as malevolent spirits dwelling underwater and in the nether regions of the earth, before later being portrayed as the aforementioned sea raiders. This was heavily influenced by the Viking raids on Ireland that were taking place during this time. Oftentimes they were depicted as having the body of a man and the head of a goat, and according to an 11th century book, they are said to have one eye, one arm, and one leg. Coming in at 3, Titans. Hailing from Greek mythology, the Titans were the pre-Olympian gods. According to the theogony of Hesiod, they were the 12 children of the primordial parents Uranus and his mother Gaia, with 6 male Titans, Oceanus, Cous, Creus, Hyperion, Lapetus, and Cronus, and 6 female Titans called the Titanides. Cronus mated with his sister Rhea, and together they became the first generation of Olympians. Zeus and his 5 siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Descendants of the Titans are also called Titans. The Titans were also former gods, the generation of gods preceding the Olympians. They were ultimately overthrown as part of the Greek succession myth, which told how Cronus seized power from his father Uranus and ruled the cosmos with the Titans as his subordinates. Now Cronus and the Titans were in turn defeated and replaced as the ruling pantheon of gods by Zeus and the Olympians in a tenure referred to as the Titanomachy. As a result of the war, Cronus and the vanquished Titans were banished from the upper world, being held imprisoned under guard in Tartarus, although according to history some of these Titans were allowed to remain free. Coming in at 2, Fatchin. Hailing from Scottish folklore, the Fatchan or Fatchin is a monster or giant described by John Francis Campbell in popular tales of the West Highlands, as having a single eye in the middle of its face, a single hand protruding from its chest instead of arms, and a single leg emerging from its central axis. Not only that, but it has a single tuft of hair on the top of its head, which Campbell says, I quote, "It were easier to take a mountain from the root than to bend that tuft." Quite the tuft indeed. However, Campbell isn't the only writer to reference the giant. Douglas Hyde did so too in his collection of Irish folklore called Beside the Fires. I quote, "He held a very thick iron flay club in his skinny hand and 20 chains out of it, and 50 apples on each chain of them, and a great venomous spell on each great apple of them, and a girdle of the skins of deer and roebuck around the thing that was his body, and one eye in the forehead of his black-faced countenance, and one bare, hard, very hairy hand coming out of his chest, and one veiny, thick-soled leg supporting him, and a close, firm, dark blue mantle of twisted, hard, thick feathers protecting his body. And surely he was more like unto devil than to man." Now, though hailing from different countries, both descriptions seem to represent branches of a common Gaelic tradition. Finally, coming in at number 1, Caicus. Hailing from Roman mythology, Caicus, meaning bad, was a fire-breathing giant and the son of Vulcan. He was ultimately killed by Hercules after terrorizing the Aventine Hill before the founding of Rome. However, let's go back. Caicus lived in a cave in Italy on the future site of Rome. To survive, he feasted on the flesh of humans and would nail the heads of victims to the doors of his cave. Now, like I said, he would later be defeated by Hercules, and according to Evander, Hercules stopped to pasture the cattle he had stolen from Geryon near Caicus's lair. As Hercules slept, the giant took a liking to the cattle and stole 8 of them, 4 bulls and 4 cows, dragging them by their tails so as to leave a trail in the wrong direction. When Hercules awoke, the remaining cattle made suggestive noises towards the cave, so Hercules, now angry, stormed towards the cave, and a terrified Caicus blocked the entrance with a vast, immovable boulder, so Hercules quite literally tore off the top of the mountain to reach him. Caicus responded with spewing fire and smoke, while Hercules attacked with tree branches and rocks the size of millstones. Hercules eventually leapt into the cave, aiming for the area where the smoke was heaviest, and grabbed Caicus, strangling the monster to death. According to Virgil in Book 8 of the Aeneid, Hercules grasped Caicus so tightly that his eyes popped out and there was no blood left in his throat. Yikes.